what's up everybody? We are 10 days out from Endgame 2020, and because today is the 10th day, and the Roman numeral number for that is X, we're going to talk about generations.
I am broadcasting on all AM frequencies. I will be at the South Street Seaport every day at midday when the sun is highest in the sky. If you are out there, if anyone is out there, I can provide food, I can provide shelter, I can provide security. If there's anybody out there, anybody, please, you are not alone.
I don't really have a whole lot of time left. Like I said, there's only 10 days left. We don't have a lot of time left if it is going to truly be Endgame 2020. So I'm going to push this video out now about the generations. I all the way back from January 8th or 9th when I did my first video, I started talking about how there was, a problem with the generations and how they line up. And I've been meaning to do this video all year long, but there's always been something else. So it's always been kind of like the back burner type thing for me. And personally, I think it's just so obvious that I don't even really I don't really care as much. But it does point out a simulation. It does point out a problem. So I hadn't really put too much stock into it because it's just like it's too damn obvious. How can anybody else not see this? I don't even know why I should have to point it out. So if you look at the generation before Generation X was the baby boomers, okay? And so it goes, right now the letters go X, Y, Z, A for alpha. And before Generation X, because right now we're in Generation Alpha, Generation A, like I said, A, AI, the children that are being born right now, which I don't know why the hell you'd have a kid right now. It's a bad time. Like, if you pay attention to the news. But the children that are being born right now are Generation Alpha. Like, within, the past, I think, 10 years. I think it started in 2010. But if you go all the way back, which is funny, because that's Generation A. But if you go all the way back to the generation that gave birth to Generation X, it was the baby boomers. I was calling them Generation W because it's W, X, Y, and Z. However, I was looking up stuff on the baby boomers, and come to find out, for some bizarre reason, they're calling them now Generation B. Okay? Generation B. For boomer, which I was saying W because W, X, Y, and Z, but now we're hearing they're being called Generation B. Although I don't think it's because of the word boomer. I think that's just however they come up with those letters. But do you see that time loop right there? Right there's a time loop. B, then X, Y, Z, A, then back to B, X, Y, Z, A, then back to B. It's bizarre because it should not line up in a natural reality. But if you look at the technology and the way technology has played out, for Generation B, the baby boomers, right? They were a warmongering generation, literally. Like, they were born during war. They were born during World War II. And all they've known is war. Going into Vietnam. The baby boomers were the children who fought in the Vietnam War. The baby boomers were the draft generation. They were drafted, and they were also the rebels. They were the ones who, were the hippies and stuff, And that was the baby boomer generation. Well, they're responsible for a lot of stuff, but the generation before that one, which you don't hear much about, is called the silent generation. How bizarre is it that they call that generation the silent generation, the one that you don't hear a whole lot about, They were the ones that were born during World War I and fought in World War II. and some born during, you know, all that era, and they gave birth to the baby boomers, the Generation B. So the silent generation is almost like a generation that really is the least one that they really talk a whole lot about. And then you go into the baby boomers who give birth to Generation X. X is the generation that has been the most overlooked generation, the one that has been quiet, right? Not quiet, not like the silent generation, because we're definitely not a silent generation, because Generation X is responsible for bands like Nirvana, groups like NWA, you know, a very hard, in-your-face movement, a alternative movement. In Generation X, we were, you know, the generation that made skateboarding and alternative sports a big deal. Everything was X for us. You know, it was, you know, even like in wrestling, you know, Generation X. Everything was geared towards that generation, was all X. Well, it's also the generation that was X'd out. When you want to X something out, you want an X file. You want the government, when the government wants to keep something quiet, they make it and they put it in the X file. Of course, then X files came out as well. You know, so everything was quiet. Everything was was closed and sealed for that generation, which was 1972. Okay, so there's just that whole the whole thing for that whole generation is just very, you know, when they talk right now, most of the time when you listen on the news and they're talking about generations, they talk about the baby boomers and they talk about the millennials. They never talk about Generation X. Why is that when it is the most, I think the only thing that we got out of Generation X that was the negative stereotype out of Generation X was that we were slackers. You know, they're saying they were like slackers because you had movies like The Breakfast Club and stuff. So the Generation X was definitely there was something that they wanted to close that generation off and skip it and go right from boomers right over to the millennials, which we know the millennials are the whiners. You know, they're the ones that we call the whiners. They were the entitled generation. They were the ones that Generation X was giving birth to, as well as some baby boomers were still having children, and those children were the millennials. In fact, there's a lot of millennials don't even want to be attached to being called a millennial. They don't even want to be attached to it. You know, you ask somebody when they were born, and they said they were born in like 1990, you know, 1994 or 5 or 6 or whatever. You say, oh yeah, you're a millennial. Oh no, I'm an Xennial. What the hell is that? So they added like this thing where millennials were embarrassed to even be called millennials because they're the entitled generation. Well, you also got, like I said, Generation Y. How bizarre is it that the letter Y, you know, wine, like whiners, you know, yawn, you know, the generation that is very kind of boring and bland, you know, it's just not, you know, and if you're getting offended by this, get over it, you know, because it's outside of your, it's outside of your control, regardless. This is not to offend anybody of any generation or to not talk bad about anybody's generation. It's literally, it's the statistics, okay? So it's outside of your control. Regardless if you're the special one and you don't, you know, there are people who on a horoscope don't act anything like their sign, and there's people like me who's a Scorpio, and I'm everything like my sign. So it doesn't just pertain to you, it's just kind of a broad thing. Because you see, the millennials were also the generation where just now, what I just did, the millennials are also the generation which was the offended generation. They're the ones who were offended about everything, and they, you know, everything offends them. You know, they don't want to hear things. They want to put their fingers in their ears and don't say this and don't say that. They're also the generation that the millennial generation is also the generation that everybody is a winner. You know, that's that generation, and so a lot of people, you know, kind of look down on that generation because it's that me generation, and that's the Y generation. Like, as in, why are you even here? Why is it even possible that, you know, you're doing anything? You know, right now they're talking about in politics, they're overlooking Generation X as the baby boomers are going to, or look like they're about to exit, which is not going to happen anyhow because this is the end. But they're talking about the millennials taking over the next. They're not talking about Generation X at all for anything, for any type of. In fact, if something happens, let's say per se that things would keep going. If something happens to Biden and Kamala Harris takes over, she's still a baby boomer. She was born. There's been baby boomers in the presidency for it will be almost 40 years. That's a long damn time, guys. That's insane. That doesn't even make any sense. So when you get past the millennials and the whiners, you go into Generation Z, which is the zombie generation. Okay, and during that time, which is the people that are in their early 20s, late teens, that's the zombie generation. That generation was born on a black screen. They literally do not know what life was like without having a cell phone in their hand, without having a black flat screen in front of their face, which has kept them asleep. Generation Z for Generation Zs, for sleeping, for being a sleep generation. Also considered the zombie generation, Z for zombie. When they, like 15 years ago, when that generation was just coming up, in the past 15 years, we have been bombarded with zombie movies and zombie apocalypses and zombie this and zombie that and shoot and kill the zombies and Z Nation and what's that one show? You guys already know that those zombie shows and stuff like that. Walking Dead. These are all reflections of that generation. Period. How is that possible? Tell me how the hell that's even possible, how that even makes sense to line up perfectly with that generation, to line up perfectly with that time. It doesn't, it should not be, that the technology just got perfectly lined up with a generation called Generation Z, which is a generation that has been sleeping in front of a black screen the entire time that they've been alive. The next generation, which is the generation we're in right now, is Generation Alpha, guys. And you know what? Generation Z is the end of the alphabet, correct? Z is the end of is in the alphabet. And I said before, and I haven't said this to you guys, but you're hearing it now, that I said, I told my ex, oh geez, I'm going to run over 12 minutes. So this is going to be a little bit longer video. I told my ex last year, I said, man, that generation, it's very possible that they're the last, real generation. That this next generation is Generation A, Generation Alpha. The way the technology has lined up, A for artificial, A for AI. There was a study that they were talking about, and if I could find it, they were saying that generation, the generation right now, with the technology, the way it's lining up, is perfect they would be the most susceptible to artificial intelligent implants. Like the children that are being born right now, they would be more susceptible to getting an artificial intelligent implant into their body, and AI being able to merge. They would, as they grow and become adults, that they would be okay with, merging with, artificial intelligence. How is that possible, guys? How the hell is that possible that it lines up perfectly? The letters that are stuck to, that have been attached to these generations, that it lined up perfectly for the technology to affect, and for those things and those times to all be perfect for the alphabet. Maybe you don't see it, but I do, and it's blatantly in my face that it makes sense in a simulation. It makes sense that that's the way a computer would organize things, right? Because computers have to have organization. Like a computer has to have organization, even though it will make false chaos. And if you play Grand Theft Auto, you can see that that chaos is still what some people like to. They think it's cute to say, controlled chaos or whatever. There's all these stupid sayings, but that's just a part. That's just still part of the system. That's still part of the operating system. It makes that, but it's still controlled, believe it or not. That's why you get a lot of people talking about, do we even have free will anymore? Well, yeah, the reason why people are so, like, it's become such a topic about free will, do we have free will or not? No, you don't, because you're an NPC. But for somebody who's part of the 172, coming from the natural reality, we understand free will. But right now, there's a lot of scientists and stuff like that who are trying to say that there's no such thing as free will, and that's because you're in a computer program, so you don't understand free will. The computer understands it, the NPCs and the computer understands it as control. And that's how the operating system works. It's not a bad thing. It's just the operating system doesn't understand it, right? And you guys can go into the whole religious mindset on that, but that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about just true free will, regardless of what you believe. Because if you have a certain religion that you believe in, and you believe that there's a God that has given this person free will, well, what about people who don't believe in that religion at all? So do they not have free will just because they don't believe in it? But I don't want to get into that topic, and please do not leave religious comments on this, because this video is about the generations. And when I'm trying to explain how it makes sense in a controlled system, in an operating system. So after Generation Alpha, after Generation AI, which is happening right now as we speak, on the news, they're talking about Donald Trump getting ready, Clockwork Orange Godfather, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the DT, I should just say Clockwork, the Clockwork Orange Godfather madness. They're talking about straight civil war, which if you listened into my videos a long time ago, I already said that this is going to happen long before the election. I told you everything that was going to happen the way it was going to happen. I'm not a psychic. I just looked at the data of 1972, and it all came out true, and it's all happening, which makes a lot of sense that they would call his generation, because he's a baby boomer. He is Generation B. It makes a lot of sense that Generation B would see the end of Generation A. So it can go all the way back to Generation B again. In fact, the baby boomers are the most obsessed. I'm going to use a bad word here. They're the most they're the most obsessed assholes with living forever. Like they are. That's the generation that they fantasize about living forever, spreading their shit. Okay, and if you're a boomer, like I said, I'm not talking about all boomers, but for the broad spectrum. In fact, when you listen to Elon Musk talking about do we live in a simulation, and Musk is a Generation X, which also is what? SpaceX. And SpaceX has done what in this year 2020? Made a lot of space breakthroughs. Regardless of what the hell you want to believe, I don't care. This is what the simulation is playing it out. So your beliefs mean nothing when it's already set in place. This is the way the system is playing it out. And I can show that through facts. But he was sitting there talking about, do we live in a simulation? And the damn baby boomer who was there, this old guy, was saying about, the simulation so they can reboot it because he wants to live forever. And if you watch my video on religions, aliens, and science, you'll see the guy I'm talking about. And I'll do a video with a little bit more of that if I have time. But this guy wants to live forever. These are the way the baby boomers are. In fact, the baby boomers, and I'm not knocking the technology because I love Alcor and stuff, but they're the ones who, got Alcor and cryogenics, and before that generation was the silent generation, and Walt Disney was part of the silent generation, and you don't hear anything about him, and he went into cryogenics to be frozen, okay, and the boomers were there to see him off. So, look, guys, it all lines up way too perfect, right? The Generation B, the boomers, Generation X, the ones that they wanted to close them off. That's also the medicated generation. That's when they started using experimental medications. And that's when they started telling that generation that we're depressed, and that's because the boomers were the ones writing the fucking scripts for that generation to try to suppress them as much as possible. try to tell them that they're all crazy. You know, in fact, the Generation X is probably the most conspiracy theories generation. That's probably where most of the generation that just does not trust anything because they X'd us out. So, and we all in that generation most likely knows that something's wrong. Look at the song from Pearl Jam, Jeremy. Watch the video. What was it? That song was about mass school shootings. Before Generation X, before our generation, in 1972 generation, how many mass school shootings were going on? The boomers did this to that generation. The boomers have done everything that's happening right now. All this shit that's bad is going on because the boomers have made it so. Okay? If we go into civil war, which we are going into civil war, if this country falls, which this country will fall, it will fall under the leadership of the Generation B. Because Generation A, Alpha, the artificial intelligence, is going to go, it's the end of that, that's it. They can't allow there to be another B, a new B generation, because it has to go back to those who want to live forever. The Generation B, the Generation Baby Boomers. It's not that hard really to figure it out. Just look at the freaking alphabet. Do some research on your own on this, because I really don't have a whole lot of time to do, because I'm working on another important video right now. But do some research on your own and take a good hard look at the letter of each one of those generations, since the baby boomers, Generation B, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, Generation A. Take a good hard look at the technology and how it's advanced throughout that time, and how it just perfectly is compartmentalized, perfect for those generations. That doesn't even make any sense. That is so designed out like a computer simulation that it doesn't work in a natural world. It doesn't work in a world where things just happen naturally. It's like forced. It's like a forced, and some of you may go into the whole, religious mindset. That's fine. That's on you. But please don't leave those comments in here, because that's not what this is about. Because this is looking at taking a hard look at some facts. I have to get off the interstate here. But anyhow, I hope that helps you guys out. Do some research on your own. Look at those letters and look at how the alphabet just fits perfect. How it's a perfect. It's too much, man. It's too much for you not to. When you look at that, and you look at how the generations line up, and then you look at the time glitch that's 1972, and you look at the time glitch that is 2020, and how those things are all connected. 1972 and 2020, how they're connected, and how the generations are connected, going back into a circular motion. B, X, Y, Z, A, B, X, Y, Z, A. I mean, it's stupid. Come on. You'd have to be, there's definitely, if you cannot see that, it's because you're an NPC. And you'll never understand it. But for those of you who are the 172, for those of you who are critical thinkers, for those of you who are glitches yourself, maybe just a glitch inside of the matrix, and you may not be a part of the 172, but you may just be a glitched program. For those of you who can see this, it's blatant. It's too. Why do you think I have such a small audience when I'm talking about world-breaking stuff? The fact that those generations line up like that, I shouldn't be the only one pointing that out. This should have been on the news when they start talking about like Generation Alpha and stuff, which they've been a little quiet about it. But when they talk about, the millennials and how, like, the news, there should be people on the news, there should be scientists who should say, hey, if we look at the way these things all line up, it's very peculiar, and it doesn't seem like it's played out naturally. It seems more like it played out through design. And I don't mean design through a higher power, but if you look at it with time glitches and everything like that, the design looks more probable that you are in a computer simulation. And that doesn't take away from any religion that you believe in. And And I talked about that before in simulations, but it definitely does seem more like it's designed through a computer simulation, because computers cannot understand true chaos. A computer program should not understand true chaos, because chaos in a program means destruction. It means a malfunction. Okay, so it cannot have true chaos. It'll totally malfunction. And then the system will lock up, and next thing you know, you got a problem. You have system error. And that's the reason why when you get on a computer and you're doing something and the program's working just fine, and all of a sudden you get an error, and then it's not working, and it could be something really, really stupid that happened, right? Like something really small, something very minor, like just something got a little cross or something, then the system won't read it. And next thing you know, the whole system crashes. And so the whole thing with the generations is the same thing. It doesn't make sense that it would be natural if it doesn't make sense that it would be natural that all of these letters for the generations would line up the way they do with the technology and everything else in the media, and the way everything's handled for the generations is very, very in order. And that just does not work in a natural reality at all. Technology, for it to play out perfectly for this generation A, Generation Alpha, Generation Artificial, my little guy fell over there, group. For it to work out, damn, I've been talking for almost 30 minutes. For it to work out just perfectly for this generation, A, Alpha, Artificial, what do you think is going to happen after this reset going into 2021? When they're talking about everything is going to artificial, okay? Everything is. You'll not, your children, these children are going to have artificial education, because it's a better education that way online. Is what they're going to play it out. You know, the one world order. You know, the fact that this generation, a lot of them won't have to just go to the doctors. They can just go online and talk to an artificial doctor. Like, it's just too perfect. Like, that would be their adulthood. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's their adulthood. Everything that's playing out right now is perfect for artificial, for Generation A. And that just doesn't maybe that works for you, but it doesn't work for people from a natural reality. Because it's totally doesn't make sense for it to play out just perfect with and then you look at, like, right now, it definitely looks like America's going to go to civil war. It definitely looks like it's going to be end of America, which is Generation A, and that generation that is pushing that is Generation B, to go right back to B. I mean, come on, guys. It's so blatantly in your face. Anyhow, also, I want to add this in here, that when you look at Generation Z, the zombie generation, that was the generation that was really pushed into a cross-gendered generation. Regardless of how you feel about this, it doesn't matter. The fact is that generation was the beginning of being pushed into a lot of cross-gender stuff, and it's going to play out very strong for Generation A, Generation Alpha, Generation Artificial Intelligence, right? Because a artificial intelligence is a genderless entity, correct? Because it doesn't need gender. And that's the same thing like when we're talking about this Generation Alpha, Generation A, that young generation is going to be more susceptible to having less children, because they're more pushed into being this unicorn, genderless generation. And you can see that all the time. And I'm sorry if that offends you, but this is just fact.
Are we a normal family? We have 2 kids. Order Domino's for dinner sometime.
All right, I'm ready to go.
In many ways, we fit the kind of normal stereotype. Our kids, Caden and Zyler, are 3.5 years old, and we're raising them using they, them, their gender-neutral pronouns, so that they can decide for themselves when, if, and how they want to identify as a gender.
Take a good hard look into the generations. Look at them for yourself and make your own conclusion. But for those of you who are part of the 172, it's this information about these. It's just too blatant for me. It's just too easy to figure out. So that's the reason why that's why I put this video off. All right, enjoy your time.